sorry. Now it's recording. Okay.
All right, thank you. First, I know it's hard to take accurate minutes during meetings, but when there is a discrepancy between the minutes submitted to the board for approval and what was actually said, which is typically available on video, I'd like the membership to be able to suggest amending any previous month's minutes at the beginning of each meeting. Second, I'm submitting my comments here today so they can be accurately attached to next month's minutes. Third, in July's meeting, Kathy Penny suggested there might be checks with only one signature. It's now October. Can you tell us when we, the members, can come by and review the checks as well as signed contracts? Fourth, in July, our former treasurer presented a detailed list of each item the board has spent money on, along with estimates for each. I have repeatedly asked to reconcile the estimates with the actual amount spent. I've also said that I don't care about minor differences, but I think the entire membership would not like the actual expenditures to be double or even triple the estimates. I've created and submitted a spreadsheet to simplify the response. For months now, I've received 0 results, even though I've offered to review the quotes, invoices, and checks. Although I don't expect malfeasance, it's concerning that the board is unwilling to share this information with its own management. That would be us, the members. And the fact that the person responsible for making these estimates, expenditures, and contracts is now the board treasurer. My CPA tells me this could never be allowed. Fifth, there have been major expenditures, thousands of dollars, on items not listed in the former treasurer's itemization, such as the cutting of the trees and moving of the fence in the playground parking lot. When another member and I met with more than a month ago with several members of the board, we were told that the remaining dangerous stumps in the playground were not removed because it would cost an additional $3,100. So our maintenance manager would remove them using a rented stump grinder from Home Depot, which had a, quote, 2-month wait list. When I called Home Depot, I was told they had 2, one for $153, another for $309 per day, readily available. Why are the dangerous stumps still there? Sixth, once again, I want to know why we still don't have a budget which would resolve most of these issues. For the record, the entire board is responsible for allowing this to happen. And finally, 7, I have concerns about the speed humps and procurement policy, but I'd like to know why the board hasn't filled out to 7 members. Is it because this board is unwilling to allow differences of opinion or oversight? In other words, a balanced, representative, and fiscally responsible board. Thank you.
Jim, thank you very much for your comments. I appreciate them. Okay. Next person who could click raise your hand in the participants window. Anyone else? Going once? Anyone else? Jim? Hold on.
I have my hand raised.
Okay, Richard. Okay, thank you. Now I see it. Thank you, Richard.
I got my hand raised.
Okay, who's after Richard? Who's that voice? That deep voice who said I have my hand raised? Who's that?
Lee.
Thank you, Lee. All right, you will go after Richard. Okay, thank you. Okay. All right. So Richard, if you would unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can't see you, but I can hear you.
So no discussion, I guess, with Jim's points, I just go on?
Yes.
Okay. Because I've asked for several months now about legal expenses, I appreciate, Robert, that you prepared the pie chart of legal expenses for the first 7 months of this year. You also indicated that you're working on 2019 legal expenses. Since June, I've been asking for an accurate report of legal expenses to be shared with members and posted to the website. So far, the only document currently posted is still the one that shows $5,000 in legal expenses since June 2019. when in fact the legal expenses since May 2019 now exceed $100,000. I'm still simply asking for an updated, accurate report of legal expenses to be posted to the website and shared with members.
Richard, is there anything else you want to add to that?
No?
Richard? Okay, thank you. In
Pretty-
fact, I'm going to answer that question when I give my report. So thank you.
Okay.
For that
Okay,
for
thanks.
that preview. Okay. All right, Lee, I'm going to,
I'm already unmuted.
okay, go ahead, Lee. Go ahead.
Yeah, I sent the board of directors an email yesterday. You responded this morning twice. I responded, or I asked that since I couldn't meet last month and I wasn't expected to be here this month due to work requirements, I asked if I could record the Zoom meeting because I haven't checked the website today, but as of last week when I checked it, there's still no September video. And so I wanted to record the meeting thinking I wasn't going to be here. You first told me that Lincoln Ishida told you that advised you not to allow anyone to record the meeting, that the Zoom was property of the LCA. Well, my opinion is I am the LCA, not you. We elected you and you didn't pick us, we picked you. And therefore we should have the right to record all these meetings, because if we were sitting at the clubhouse, we would be recording it. So there's no difference. So you told me no, I was not going to be given permission. And then 15 minutes later, you sent me another email and told me I was. Well, I tried to record it and you have not allowed me to record. So I don't understand.
Well, Lee,
You say something else.
okay, so Lee, let me respond to that because I didn't send any second email. I'm really curious about that.
Do you want me to forward it to everybody
Yes.
right now?
No, you can forward it to me, yes. So Lee, I sent you I said yes you could, and then we spoke to council, and council advised against doing that. And so this meeting is being recorded. We had a problem with the September recording because Andy's internet went out in the middle of the meeting and deleted the first half of that meeting. Alice has an audio recording. Am I correct, Alice, about that? Alice has an audio recording and we'll upload that audio recording.
It seems like to me, if we all recorded it, you wouldn't have this issue.
Well, you know something? You could right there on your phone, record the meeting. No one's stopping you from right now personally recording the meeting, okay?
Well, I'm pretty sure other people are doing that, but
Well,
I
that's
would just
fine.
like,
So just doing it,
so
you know, and
what
we're
is
not-
I guess the next question is what's the big deal? It's supposed to be transparent.
Okay. Thank you. From our point of view, we are being transparent, Lee. Thank you, Lee. Next person who'd like to talk? Next person?
Alice,
All right, so now let me go to people who are on the phone. Anyone who's on the phone can unmute themselves, and if they want to speak, they could speak now. Anyone on the phone want to unmute? Okay, so I think we're concluded with the comments from the community. I want to thank you for your comments. We do take note of them, and we will respond to those comments. And in fact, I want to respond to, I made a presentation at the September, this is October, at September meeting. And in fact, I'm going to talk to that right now. So wait 1 second, I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So those of you who are on video can see the legal expenses from April 14th, 2019 to August 30th, 2020. The total legal expenses are, well, which is correct, close to $100,000. What I would like for you to take note of is that the normal required board business normal sort of meat and potato stuff that boards do, only counts for 26% of those legal expenses. Legal challenges by members of this community. We have previous prior challenge by Mr. Denny, and then a current challenge that's ongoing that has consumed 50% of those legal expenses. Then we have the election and the legal women voter challenges. That's 12%. Road challenges by members, 12%. 1% crime and safety, and those in fact were covered by a grant. So it's our hope that this stops, these legal challenges stop, because from my point of view, there is a much more harmonious way, less expensive way of resolving some of these issues. And yes, everyone's entitled to go to court. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. But I want you to make clear the expenses that if you do bring a suit against the LCA, and Lee, I'd like to speak to a point you made. We were elected by the community. We represent the LCA. That's our fiduciary responsibility as board members. And while we still maintain those positions, we will exercise that authority. And I invite you at some point to run for these positions. So these legal challenges not only cost money, but take up tremendous amount of time. So I'm showing you this information to say, hopefully this is the last time this happens to us, and that we go forward in a more harmonious way. Now, stop sharing my screen. I want to bring up, we are currently under, I'm going to bring this up, hold on one second. Hold on one second. Oh yeah, here we are. So we are currently, there's a legal claim being made, it was filed by members of the LCA, and we're currently in mediation regarding those claims. And Michelle Luke, who is the lawyer for Travelers, which is our insurance company that protects us. I'm actually reading from her email so I get this really correct. She says, my thought is to advise the board that we, the board, has had 2 sessions with the mediators. That's retired Judge, hold on one second, retired Judge John McConnell, to address challenges to the manner in which the last election was held, even though it was overseen by the League of Women Voters. B, issues related to the bylaws, which were in particular when the annual meeting occurs and whether terms should be staggered. And C, issues related to Mr. Andrews' authority serving as president of the LCA board. And that following the last session with the mediator, we continued to communicate with claimants' attorneys in an effort to resolve their issues and to avoid further, and in our view, unnecessary litigation and expense. There are at least 2 demands being made by claimants on which they are unwilling to compromise, and which the LCA board feels they are without authority to concede, that we are without authority to concede, that we have no ability to respond to those points legally. And 4, we have provided, we have since provided extensive documentation regarding LCA's operations to ensure them that the business of the LCA has been handled properly. 5, we have been asked that they reconsider their position so as to avoid a threatened lawsuit. And 6, we are awaiting further direction from the mediator as to whether discussions will continue with him. So that's the current status, which is, I guess, to some extent, we are in limbo right now. We've had these 2 mediation sessions, and the mediation is technically still going on. And what the people who have filed these legal claims, what they're going to do next, we don't know right now at this point. Okay, let me go on. The County Council yesterday just passed a resolution regarding the grants, and we expect to receive a contract in a matter of weeks, maybe a month, from the county, which our lawyer will review, and we hope to have a check of $375,000 from the county to pursue the road recovery before the end of the year. Jay Turkowski has been working with the engineers and getting everything lined up. So once we receive the check, we will be ready to go and start the work. So that's where we are with that. And I think Andy Andrews will give you more of an update during his presentation. And finally, I'd like to report that I've asked my neighbor, Margot, to undertake something that I believe will help further uplift our community. Some of you might know Ima. She's a writer, quite prolific writer. So I've asked her if she'd undertake a project to gather all the creative talent of Leilani in a way so we can show off in terms of who we are. So I'm just going to read what she wrote me, what she wants to accomplish. During these stressful times when we are so isolated from one another, we are challenged with finding new ways of connecting and sharing our experiences with our community. Let's design a collage of creativity from our neighbors, a virtual magazine with stories and pictures of our unique and imaginative expressions. So many of us are tapping into our artistic sides while we are home and would welcome the opportunity to share them. What better way to send something positive and uplifting to help balance the stress we all feel? We will invite our neighbors to submit their written work, poetry, short stories, photos of their paintings, sculptures, even gardens, and culinary creations with recipes. I will format them into a virtual magazine that will be available to Leilani residents to enjoy. So that's, I think, a very positive way we can work together and show our best as a community here. And this will be published digitally in the beginning of the new year in January. And anyone who wants to help Ima, either contact her directly or contact me. I'll pass your name on to her. I think this is a very exciting enterprise just to get a sense of all the creative talent that lies in this community. Okay, so that's my president's report. And Andy Andrews is treasurer. He's next.
Thank you, Robert. The September P&L and balance sheet are both currently posted online for everyone to see. The dues collection process that we began several months ago has generated about $36,000 in past dues has been collected that had not been collected prior to the start of the year. Prior to the process starting. We're about to begin a process of trying to collect some of the very serious past due amounts that are owed by members who have not paid due in many years. There's a shockingly large number of members that were permitted over the course of the last 5 to 10 years to have dues go uncollected with no action taken other than a lien to be placed on their property. Problem with placing a lien on property is there's no real enforcement capability until the property transfers. So if someone's going to live in the property for many years or even decades, the lien will just simply sit in place and will provide no enforcement to speak of. We're exploring more punitive actions to go against members who have completely ignored their dues for many, many years. And that's it. That's the treasurer's report. Thank you, Robert.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, let's get back here. So next we're going to have Alice Lindell to talk about COVID-free testing. Alice? I'll just have to unmute her. All right, Alice, you're unmuted. Go ahead,
Okay.
Alice.
The first news item is that COVID-19 testing has gotten closer to our home. I go swimming up at the swimming pool all the time, and they announced that the all day Tuesday, the pool will be closed because they're going to have free COVID testing. You do not need your insurance or anything like that. Anybody can just come. So they're really hoping to get a better picture of COVID-19 on the Big Island. So I'm going to go, and I hope you do too. Unfortunately, I can't get anybody to tell me when they're starting and when they're finishing. So I'm going to go in the middle of the day. Second news item is that the team that's studying rapid ohia death, the ones that want to come here and find survivor ohia trees to help possibly clone for the future of reforesting all the devastated parts of the Big Island that have lost their trees due to the disease. Anyway, they're coming in November. They had to put it off a month because they're worried about COVID, but they're going to be going around, and they told me to thank everyone who's gotten a hold of them because they got a terrific response from LCA members who all want them to come to their house. So as soon as we have a date in November, we will be emailing that information out to people on the MailChimp server. So those are my announcements. And Robert, I bet you want me to go straight into the seeker report.
Right.
Yes.
Is that when I'm supposed to show the pictures or not?
I have one thing about seeker, and then I'll tell you when the pictures come up. Okay. There are two crime situations that I know of in Leilani. One is very sad. It's a couple who have not been back to care for their home because they are holding out until COVID is over with, and they were working on reestablishing their home, and this is on Lower Malama Street. And they called us and told us they had heard that there were squatters in their home, and they have people periodically checking up on the place, and it turns out that the squatters were there sometimes and not there other times, and the person's wrote a letter, a notarized letter to the police department saying, we do not authorize anyone to be in there. We would like to have you remove those people. We will identify a person to stand in for us and vouch for us. And they sent all kinds of ID. And a few days after that, their house was completely emptied of all the furniture and everything in there that was plugged in. And so now they're facing the loss of all their stuff as well as a need to come back and work on it. And I doubt if people are staying in there, but that's a real sad one, and it's one that shows that even if you have periodic people checking on your house, it's not good enough to keep it from break-ins. And my second my second announcement is something of a kind of experiment with Robert and I. We have a new person who is apparently, and I don't know the location, squatting on Kumakahi Street, and he was caught trying to break into a home of a person on Alapai, and the owner came home at the right moment, and she got pictures of them escaping the house. And we know who this person is, and if this is the person who's been looting other houses, we thought it would be good that people could see the person so that they can at least have a mental image of somebody who we don't want around, and we would like to have him move on to some other place. And so Robert's going to screen share on his end to show you the pictures that I gathered together. Let's see, okay. That's the person. He does have a girlfriend who comes with him, but we don't have pictures of the girlfriend. And so the next picture shows them coming out of the carport and racing away, and the owner got a photo of him. And we blew this photo up, and he's wearing a lot of the same clothes that he was wearing in that other picture. And he thoughtfully put a whole bunch of pictures of himself on Facebook. So we have close-ups as well. Here's one, and then one more. He was wearing that same, handkerchief over his eyes that he was wearing in the robbery picture, but they didn't succeed in the robbery. So just keep your eye open for this person, and if you see him, call the police. The police are looking for him, and they have a case opened trying to find this person. So that's all on that subject. Let's see, who am I standing in the way of here?
Alice, thank you for that really informative report. I think that message.
And if you would like, I would like to post it somewhere, but we're not allowed to post on Facebook. So I'm not sure, maybe we can think of a good place.
Well, maybe we could post on our website, people to be aware of.
Yeah, that's a good idea. We'll post it on the LCA website.
Right.
Because we don't get very many people that we get such good photographs of.
Okay, so let's move on. We're going to move into old business, correct, Alice? And you're going to do a CCNR report?
Mm-hmm. Yep, you're going to have to listen to me talking a lot here. The committee to create the fine structure has met, and they have been really intense and zooming in on making sure the CCNRs are working well, and I really appreciate what they've done. And the first thing they did was run into a roadblock when looking to think about fines, and that is there are several, not a lot, but several very difficult to deal with CCNR statements. And you all know that the CCNRs are cast in stone and they cannot be changed. So over the years, they've been used and interpreted many different ways. And sometimes someone who has a particular violation is told they have this CCNR violation and some another. And I'm not going to tell you in detail all about those there, but for those of you who do follow this closely, they are number 6, number 12, number 7, and number 4. And I'm just going to give you an example. Number 6 is called temporary or separate improvements, which means most directly that you can't build a garage before you build a house. And this has been used to cite people for living in a tent or living in a shack or living in a vehicle. And really that the intent of the CCNR was to make sure that people didn't build their garage first and then go limit it and never get around to building a house. You know, so that the intent is not the same as the violation that's been used against. So we're going to try to, without, I hope, doing too many policies, maybe just one, clarify what we mean by the particular difficult to interpret CCNRs. And once they get clear on on that, and we can make sure that it's much more understandable which CCNR goes with which kind of violation, then they'll finish the work of coming up with the fine structure. I did want to mention too, and maybe this doesn't mean a lot to some of you, but there's been quite an upswing of house purchases in Leilani. There's a lot of new homes being sold, and sometimes sold within a few days. And they're getting prices for their homes that they were thinking about asking before the eruption occurred. So we're part of what looks like a real estate boom in here in Leilani. People think that we are safer than some other places, I guess. But we have a lot of real positive people showing up, real excited about moving here. And I think this is really a good sign. When our lots are not worth very much and houses are going for a pittance, then we don't get people who are real keen on fixing up and building because they can't afford to. But so that's just a little trend I thought you guys would want to know about. And that's it for the CCNR report.
Okay. Thank you, Alice. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to move into the speed hump part of the meeting. And Richard, I invite you and Mark, if Mark's there, and if Jean is there, to speak to Kahukai. And then Alice and Andy will talk about the proposed speed humps policy. So Richard, I'm asking you to mute yourself.
Hello?
Yep, it's all yours.
Hear me okay?
Perfectly, perfectly.
I'm not sure if Mark's on, and I'm not sure if Jean's on, but I'll go through real quickly. We don't need to get into like another 30-minute conversation like last month, so hopefully this will go pretty fast. But just to recap, in August, we were told that you could request LCA to pay for speed humps by going before the board. And then last month, the policy was amended and you guys approved it to just require 75% of homeowner residents within 400 feet in each direction of proposed speed humps. So we talked about there's an opportunity in the coming months for us to install asphalt speed humps when the contractor's equipment and crew are here to repair Moku, Malama, and Kupono. So we're requesting speed humps to be placed about 200 feet each direction at the stop signs on Kumakahi. One additional speed hump between Moku and Pomakai to slow down speeders along that stretch. And we've obtained 100% approval from the required homeowner occupants for these 3 speed humps. And each one of these, we're proposing it to be located between current vacant lots on each side of the street, so as not to be adjacent to houses or driveways. And then additional speed humps will be requested on Upper Kahukai, which Mark is still working on, I believe. If he's on the call, he can update us.
He's on the call, and I've asked him to unmute.
And by the way, just to point out, Upper Kahukai has the same issues that South Miley has, in that vehicles from Section 1 used paved portion of Upper Kahukai to get to North Miley to get to Leilani. So again, Mark can update us about what's going on up there, but we're requesting your approval for LCA to install the proposed speed humps on Kahukai.
Okay. Thank you, Richard. Mark, Mark, you can unmute yourself if you want to participate. For some reason, he's not unmuting. Okay. All right. Richard, thank you very much for your presentation. And I don't think Jean is on the call. Okay. So now will Alice and Andy talk about the speed humps proposed policy? And
Robert?
yes?
Robert?
Who's that?
Mark.
Oh, Mark?
Mark. Hi.
Mark Ellis, yeah, but I'm looking for Mark Anero, and not Mark Ellis.
Mark, how are you?
Oh, Mark O'Neill, is that Mark O'Neill?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, Mark. Go ahead, Mark.
I was trying to unmute. Finally, I did it. Anyway, Just want to recap on the speed humps up here on Upper Kahukai. This has been in the works since I've been on the board. I've always wanted to put speed humps up here and mainly throughout Kahukai from the bottom to the top. Because it's a straight shot. We all know that that road is so long that people speed through these. And now that since the eruption, there's been a lot of people renting, moving above of me. A lot of speeders are coming through the top section of Kahukai. So I had it measured out that I had made a proposal on putting in 6 speed humps, asphalt, 400 feet apart. That's what I had looked at. Because the policy, regulations calls for you can have it between 200 to 400 feet. I thought 400 would be sufficient. So this issue has been going round and round since I was on the board, and all kind of policies that we needed to put in place. We finally had it there, and then we needed, I believe, so many percent of property owners within 400 feet of 300 to 400 feet of the proposed speed humps that you wanted to have it located at. So just to give you a general idea on this upper portion of Kahukai would be from Miley up to permit 1. There would be 6 speed humps. So I don't know if this is going to go through, but I have gotten a dozen petitions approved, and I'm sure I can get the rest of the property owners here. A lot of them, they have gates. They don't open their gates. If I know them, call them, but otherwise I'll have to wait until they see them. So I'm kind of still working on it. At one point, I told the board that I can even put the speed humps in myself because I work with speed humps as far as asphalt, yeah. So I know how to do it. Just to let the board know what's going on. This is all what I have.
Okay. Thank you, Mark, and I apologize for botching your last name. We've been in receipt, of those signed petitions, and we'll take that under advisement. So just thank you for your work, and thank you, Richard. And now, actually, we're going to talk about this policy, so we have a way forward. Alice and Andy, would you unmute yourself? And we'll talk about the policy.
Yeah, Robert, Alice is going to do the initial introduction to this.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Andy. Andy and I worked on a draft speed hump policy, a proposed speed hump policy. It's definitely still in the works. And because it was generally agreed by everyone that the 2016 policy was very onerous, it required you have all kinds of gadgets that allowed you to count the number of cars that went by and determine their speed, something we would never be able to do. But just to set the record straight, as far as I know, Miley Street was the only street so far that has started putting speed humps up. But when I asked for them, it was in a climate of people really, really worked up about all the speeders on Miley Street. And it was not a policy to ask the board to pay for it at that time. That was definitely never in any policy that I either knew about before or have learned about since. And just to say that. And I'm just going to tell you exactly how I did it. I'm going to try to make this really short. At the first meeting, I asked the board, what do I need to do? And they said, 75% of the owners on your street get a petition. And then the next meeting, I brought the petition to the board and a map showing where all the people lived and who were the renters, who were the owners, and where we wanted to put the bumps. And Robert Golden informed me later that week the petition was approved, and it was my job to do the research to figure out how, which ones to buy that satisfied the state requirements and the most cost-effective way. And I handed it off to a member on our street who liked to do stuff like that. And he did many cost comparisons and determined that rubber/plastic speed humps from Home Depot would be the most cost-effective. So I told the board how much those would cost. So we didn't set the price ahead of time. And I told them that they would be $1,300 each just for the speed humps themselves. And the board made a motion and approved buying 2 of the speed humps with the proviso that we would install them ourselves and that we would maintain them ourselves. And I paid for the speed humps, and we waited many, many months for them. And the members got together and we agreed that if these 2 speed humps did the job for us, then we would raise money among ourselves to have more speed humps. We'd rather have 6. And that's the complete story. And I think that had we known about the speed hump packet and the onerous requirements, I imagine we probably wouldn't have speed humps now. But we all agree that it needs to be changed. And Andy made what I think is a simple, really straightforward policy that doesn't require a lot of reading, and we put it on the website, and Andy's going to explain it to you, I think, unless he'd like me to do that.
No, that's fine, Alice. I'll go through it.
Okay.
So as Alice said, we felt that the process of asking to have speed humps installed was cumbersome. And we also felt that the only people that really should make a decision as to whether there should or should not be speed humps would be those people who are directly affected by them. I did at the last meeting introduce a motion that affected what is described as 400 feet from the 2 extreme ends of the speed hump installation. In rethinking that, we realized the correct number should actually be 200 feet because if the speed humps were 400 feet apart, the center spot of each grouping would be only 200 feet from each speed hump. So we changed that dimension from 400 foot to 200 feet, which will make it easier to attain the 75% agreement because there'll be less people involved. The other thing that was ambiguous in some minds, including mine, was who should have the right to make the decision. So what we did was we came up with 2 terms, one of them being affected and the other being qualified. So the affected people are defined as the owners of owner-occupied property within 200 feet of each direction from the last and first speed hump, and also all of those lots in between the qualifying speed humps. Then the qualifying, meaning who signature is required for the 65% approved. We defined it as an LCA member occupied home with only 1 approval per home being permitted. Then we defined non-qualifying, and we defined non-qualifying as undeveloped lots, unoccupied houses, abandoned houses, absentee owner houses, rentals, be they either short-term or long-term, or houses that are occupied by house sitters. So in other words, only if you both own the home and live in the home do you qualify as one of the people whose signature can be added to or required on the 75% compliance. We also said that part-time residents, otherwise known as snowbirds, may be included in the qualified member count, but they are not required to be included. And the reason for that is because some of those folks are tough to get a hold of or hardly ever here. We said the speed humps are to be made. By the way, this whole policy is posted on the website. We said that the speed humps would be either made of asphalt or they would be a DOT approved speed hump. We went on to say that they should be spaced at approximately 400-foot intervals, apropos to what Mark had said, that sometimes the spacing is going to be different from that. We determined that we proposed that the cost of the speed humps and the signs that are required and the posts for the signs be borne by the affected homeowners, and that the signs would be installed by LCA maintenance. We decided to do that because of the mowing. We wanted to make sure that the mowing installation doesn't get in the way of the mowing of the sides of the roads. We decided they should be installed in 1 block minimum increments on the east-west streets. In other words, every street except for Kahukai and Malama, and in a minimum 2 block increments on Kahukai and Malama. The reason for that is it keeps each block a group of homeowners who will have the say-so as to whether or not they get them or not. The speed hump package that's provided by the state of Hawaii will be amended to the policy, and the members will be responsible for the upkeep and maintenance of the speed humps. So the same group of people that paid for it will also be responsible for any costs of upkeep or maintenance. And as a final paragraph, we said that if the members wish to request that the LCA Treasury pay for their speed humps rather than the homeowners paying for the speed humps, that they would have to reach out to the membership. We felt that it was a decision. We did some quick math. I know, Alice, you helped with this, that if the LCA were to install speed humps on every single street at the cost of LCA, and Alice just took off, but I know Alice has some rough.
I went to get my cheat.
Thank you. So Alice, what did you project that if the entire community were supplied with speed humps, what the approximate cost would be?
Well, there are lots of places where no speeding ever occurs. So this is the outlier. It would be $894,000 and $894,400. But more realistically, maybe there are 3 blocks or 5 blocks that would need it. And say if we just had 5 blocks that needed, that would be $26,000. In our particular case here on Miley Street, the investment was $2,500. So that's only $2 per person. But these other ones get up into pretty big numbers, and we maybe need to talk to the membership and understand it if they want to pay that or not, because we are under a lot of criticism for wasting money, and we can't write a check that big without having people wanting input.
The other thing is, I think that Mark Jaunillo made a great point when he said that he and I both live on Kahukai Street, and we both know, as does Richard from the opposite end of the street, that Kahukai Street is sometimes used, as Mark said, practically as a racetrack. It's a dead straight run. All of us have seen people blowing through the stop signs like they weren't even there, just coming up the street at, I'm guessing, probably in excess of 50 miles an hour. And so it ultimately, to deal with all of those stretches out of the LCA budget, our feeling was that it should be put before the membership. And then the last line of the policy says that this policy supersedes and entirely replaces any similar LCA policy. So I'd like to make a motion for the acceptance of the policy, which will then open discussion for it on the policy. So do I have a second on the motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, so I'd like to open discussion on the motion.
So let's
Maybe, and
Alice?
maybe people would like a chance to study the printed version and think about it. I mean, that's actually quite a bit of stuff in there to handle. But others may have different idea.
So I would like to.
We did post it with the minutes and sent it out with the MailChimp, which hopefully gave everyone who was potentially affected by it ample opportunity to read it through.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to do something that we don't usually do. I'm actually going to open this up to everybody who's at this meeting to get, I'd like you to keep your comments down to 1 minute if you want to make a comment on this policy at this point. So again, I'm opening this up to people, to the community who's here, if you want to comment on the proposed policy. So if you just raise your hand, go to the participant window, raise your hand in the participant window. And I have Richard. So Richard, you're unmuted. Go ahead, Richard.
Mine are just some nitpicks with the wording. In the first two, affected and qualifying, affected owner occupied is really clear. But the second one, LCA member occupied, could be a renter, for example, while they're building a house. So it seems like they both should be owner occupied.
Okay.
Farther down, Kahukai Street is misspelled. And the side streets are actually, I think, north-south streets, not east-west cross streets. I think they're north-south streets.
Okay. Any substantive concerns,
Well,
Richard?
I guess the substantive one for me would be asking LCA member, the entire membership of LCA, to get 20% approval. I mean, we've never been able to do that. No, I don't even know that we can get that many votes. So that's never going to happen.
Okay.
Just my opinion.
Okay. Thank you, Richard.
May I answer a couple of things? First of all,
go ahead.
Thanks for catching the typo. LCA member is defined within the bylaws as an owner. So, but I do see the reason for just a reclarification to put the word owner before member. So we can amend that qualifying to read defined as an LCA owner member occupied home. It's a little redundant, but I think the clarification is worthwhile. Let's see here. And I believe you are absolutely correct that east-west and north-south were transposed. I think that was a cut and paste error, and we will fix that as well, because they are, in fact, north-south streets. So we'll get that squared away too. And And thank you for those 3 clarifications.
Okay,
I have another-
Mark.
Okay.
Marconia? Mark,
Yes, Robert.
go ahead. You raised your hand. You want to speak?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I know Miley Street already bought that plastic type of speed hump. What's the dimension on that? I mean, if
They
we're gonna go with speed hump, it's better to get the 6x20. You see that throughout Hilo in residential, through community businesses. You know, it really slows the traffic down. It doesn't really jolt the vehicle. You can go a little faster than a regular speed bump, and the ride is not as drastic. Yeah. So my comment on this is we need to look at asphalt speed bumps. That's 6x20.
Okay.
Robert, may I comment?
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
first of all, I very much defer to Mark. Mark's whole livelihood is earned with asphalt, so he knows more in his little finger than I know in my entire life about asphalt. I did, however, check out the speed humps that are at the airport, which are, I'm sure they're not cheap, but they're plastic ones. And so it appears that there are alternatives that accomplish what you're talking about, Mark, which is there to slow the traffic to between 15 and 25 miles an hour, not bring it down to 3 to 5 miles an hour, the way that speed bumps are intended to do, like in a parking lot. And so, and that's the reason why in this policy from the word bump and stayed with the word hump, because again, as I'm certain you know better than I, they're defined quite differently in the Department of Transportation and the state and the Hawaii's definition. So what we're proposing is that anything that gets used meet the correct definition as a speed hump and not as a speed bump. Does that sound like that's a reasonable way of coming at it, Mark?
Yes.
Okay,
Right,
thank
Andy.
you. Thank you.
The ones I bought, the ones that I purchased are exactly like the ones out at the airport, and I found the exact same thing in HPP as well. And they are 20 feet across. They come in 2 pieces, and you line them up across the street, and they go the full 20 feet. And the reason our group decided to not go with asphalt is that we have cracks in our street, which Leilani is planning to repair. And we didn't want our speed humps to be ripped out and have to do it over again and I think we're fairly, low on the repair list. We're gonna have to wait quite a while, but we didn't want to have to rip them out and put them in again. But I also couldn't find anyone who would give me a quote on putting in only 2 speed humps with asphalt. They were only interested in a bigger job than that.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone else? Richard wants to speak again. Richard?
Yeah, just a quickie. The plastic rubber humps that Alice bought are actually 3 feet by 10 feet. So it takes 2 to go across the street. And what Mark's talking about is the humps that if you drive down Kamaili Opikau Road, that's what they are. And they actually slow you down to 25 miles an hour, but they're not aggressive toward your car.
Okay.
Okay, so if there's no other, thank you, Richard and Mark both. If there's no other,
I have another comment. I don't have place to raise my hand. I highly support having speed bumps on Kahukai Street. I live a long way from there, and at night I lay in bed and I can hear these horrible motorcycles roar. I can hear them where they start, and I can tell where they're turning, and they do the whole street, and they're there late at night, and they're just nasty. They really need to be slowed down. I don't know if they're, some are definitely motorcycles because I've watched them go, and some are definitely cars. So I would, as a member, be very supportive of spending money to help them if they need it.
I have one question, Mark. Would those speed humps slow down a motorcycle?
Yes, it will.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anyone else? Mark, go ahead. Mark, go ahead.
So when will those speed humps be installed on Island?
They're still not installed.
Yeah, when will it be installed?
When?
Yes.
I'm sorry. As soon as we can get, we have a team of 6 people to work on it. As soon as I can get all of them lined up and in a free for a particular weekend, we're going to do it. And I would say if I was not on the board, it would be already done because, you know, I'm the one who's trying to, you know, keep everybody together. And it's been
I'd like to see that going in as soon as possible.
yeah.
Well, Alice
if
has
this
some of that.
policy goes through, then Michael Howe-Neal will be helping us put them in, and that would speed things up tremendously.
Alice wasn't part of that. Also, the COVID situation, that the hesitancy to get people together to work.
There was that, but the other thing is when COVID came, suddenly all the speeders disappeared except for only 2 guys. And we don't get those motorcycles. They come up to Siones and then they turn around and go back the other way. So the, you know, many speeders has not been, we expect it to come back after COVID is over.
So is there more? I'm just wondering, Andy and Alice, do you want to call the question at this
Yes,
meeting?
that's what I was going to say, that with those 3 corrections made by Richard Skidmore, which I don't feel are substantive enough that we need to resubmit the policy, I'd like to make a motion
Robert,
that
can
we
you?
accept the
All right,
policy.
hold on 1 second. Is that Phil?
No, this is Brian Young.
Okay,
Brian
go
Young,
ahead.
iPhone.
Go ahead,
I have
go
a
ahead,
question.
Brian.
I have a
Go ahead.
question in regards to the old policy was that the board did not pay for it, LCA. And the new policy is the residents have to pay for it. But Alice has been reimbursed for the 2 speed bumps. So will she have to pay back the money that she's been paid for those speed bumps since they're not installed and it's not a policy?
So, all right, so to answer that question, I guess I'm the only one who's on the board at that point. The board felt the reason the board was willing to pay for 2 speed humps was because the situation on Miley was being caused by Section 1. And those speeders were not on that block, but they actually were coming from Section 1 and speeding either into Section 1 or speeding out of Section 1. And that's why the board was willing to pay for those 2 speed humps. But in terms of internal traffic within Section 2, I'm speaking for myself. I believe it's the belief of the board that those should be generated, the cost for those should be borne by the residents on that particular street.
Well, the same situation is on Miley Street coming off of Kahukai Street. Those people are Section 1 going down Miley.
Robert, may I address that?
Yes.
We haven't been what would be the north side of Miley Street has not approached the board at all about an installation. So it's kind of a moot point because it hasn't been requested.
All right. So, Andy, did you want to move the question?
Please.
Okay. So, Alice, you want to call the roll and we'll see how people vote?
The motion to approve the proposed speed hump policy, voting, let's see here. Okay, Andrews,
Yes.
Robert Golden,
Yes?
Phil Denny,
Now, Phil, hold on, he has to unmute. So Phil Denny, he's right now muted.
trying to talk.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go, yes.
Yeah, no, I vote no.
Okay. And Alice Lindahl, yes. 3 vote yes, 1 no. The motion passes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, let's go forward. The next, hold on, the next item on the agenda is, let me just get there in a second, make sure I'm keeping everything in the right order. Next is, well, I already spoke to the grant distribution. I already gave that in my initial report, so that's done. Andy Andrews on the SBA loan status and initial engineering course.
Okay, so I've been working, right, put it the other way around. Jay Cherkosky has been working with me on getting a couple of engineering firms to come out and do an official site assessment. We're working with engineering partners and embarrassedly, I can't remember the name of the other firm. They're both civil engineering firms in Hilo, licensed civil engineering firms. And we've asked them both to come out and walk the streets, the roads that are slated for repair as broken up by the 3 phases of the grant. Phase 1 being the Moku Kapono repairs, phase 2 being mostly Malama Street vertical displacements, and phase 3 being the access to the isolated homes at the bottom of Kahukai. Obviously, we can't have the engineer yet look at the phase 3 because of the the county has to do their work first in getting up Pahuiki Road repaired and coming up the 1,100 feet up Leilani Avenue to the base of Kahukai, at which point the LCA would repair the bottom 575 feet of Kahukai Street, which would give access to the, somebody's not muted. If they could, if all of you can mute, we're getting a lot of feedback. Thank you. The 575 feet of Kahukai. So phase 1 and phase 2, the engineers will come out, do a walkthrough, and then we've asked both of them to submit an initial scope of work proposal. From those 2 scope of work proposals, we'll put those before the board, and we will make a determination to either choose one of those firms or determine that neither of those firms is the right firm to move forward with. And then that firm will in turn, the selected firm will then write a scope of work proposal, which will then generate the RFQs, request for quotation, which will go out to a minimum of 3 qualified paving and excavation contractors, and the engineering firm will make the assessment as to the fact that the contractors have in fact included in their quotes everything that's required in the scope of work and the RFQ, and that would permit us to move forward. And we will have inspection procedures written into the RFQ where the engineering firm will make determinations as to the correctness and suitability of the work, and also determine the payment schedule as to how and when the contractors will be paid incrementally until the project is completed. And that's where we stand on that right now.
Andy, thank you for that thorough report. Are you going to go on about the SBA loan
I can do that.
status, the loan status?
Yeah, so we've been assigned a new loan officer. There was a little bit of a glitch on the SBA end. They assigned us to a residential officer instead of a commercial officer. And I caught that error, fortunately. I'm not saying it's fortunate that I caught it, it's fortunate that it was caught. And we've been now reassigned to a correct commercial SBA loan officer. He's working on getting us the, as most of you know, we put in the request for an initial $25,000 disbursement, which was required to keep the loan open. So that initial what we're assuming is that initial $25,000 disbursement will be made to the LCA. We'll simply bank that money until the decision is made that we either do or don't actually need it. It can be returned at any point to the SBA at no penalty other than interest. If we were to, there'll be no principal payment for 5 months after we receive it, but that would also permit us to begin to draw money against the total amount of the approved loan, which was $358,100. We're assuming that will stay the same amount. We aren't sure of that because we haven't seen the loan documents, and that is earmarked to provide the additional funding that would be required if additional funding were to be required in addition to the $375,000 grant from the county. That money would be available to us and could either be used or not as LCA requires to complete the work.
Okay, thank you, Andy.
You're welcome.
So you're on for a few more turns. We're now on to the procurement policy.
Okay, so the procurement policy, which is also posted on the LCA website, and I know has created some controversy. The procurement policy is the first ever procurement policy that we can find that has ever existed in the LCA, at least going back about 20 years. I've met online with past presidents, including the president who was in place for the 3 years prior to your being voted onto the board, Robert. And then I went back and did a telephone interview with President Al Detweiler, who was either president or treasurer of the LCA for a period of about 10 years. And neither of those presidents are aware of any written procurement policy at all. I went through the minutes of meetings going back 15 years, and I can't find any motion in those minutes that discusses any procurement policy at all. There are some claims that there was a procurement policy. I've asked previous board members to provide it, but no one's been able to do that other than to claim that it existed, but in actuality, it appears it never did. And in fact, the policy that's claimed to exist has many aberrations that don't comply with that policy. So it appears that lots of contracts were signed, lots of agreements were made, lots of purchases were made that would not have adhered to the procurement policy that's professed to have existed. So what this board is proposing is that apparently for the first time in many years, we actually put in place a written, voted on, and passed as a motion procurement policy that would define clear parameters and incremental steps for purchases and contractual obligations for the LCA. The original policy, the way we presented it, was set at a $5,000 limit that would be capped at the, that would exceed the bylaws requirement. As all of you on the board know very well, the bylaws only require that the president and the treasurer approve purchases. It's with the oversight of the board, but there's really no mechanism to do that. What we're putting in place is that there unambiguously has to be a vote of the board. In discussions, this board, and with input from members, this board has decided that $5,000 is excessive. And so we've lowered the number down to $2,500. Now, the reason there were suggestions that it go all the way to $500. And I talked to past presidents again, and I also talked to leaders of other homeowners associations. If we were to set it too low, no financial action could move forward without a vote of the board. And since we as a board only meet once a month, it could mean that relatively routine and minor expenditures, for example, we recently had to put tires on the truck and it was $653. So we would have had a board meeting, which, as all of you know, is a cumbersome process. There's a notification, 7-day notification requirement. So the $2,500 number was arrived at feeling like it will permit day-to-day LCA operation using the wisdom and prudence of the elected board. At $2,500, the board would be required to vote. Now that does create a few glitches because several of our insurance policies are in excess of $2,500. So we would have to, for the first time ever, in the past 17 years, the board has never once voted on the re-upping of our insurance. I've spoken with our insurance agent, and it was renewed on a single signature every year for the past 17 years. It wasn't always the same signature, but there weren't two signatures. So we'd create a few obstacles that haven't existed in the past, but I think it's a good policy. It also lists the criteria, and obviously the policy's a little wordy. Hopefully all of you have read it. But it does say that when engaging outside contractors, the qualifications that will be used shall include, first of all, the qualifications of the contractor. Are they someone who's qualified to provide the work? The experience of the contractor or the vendor, the costs, of course, appropriate licensing and insurance, and then conflicts of interest to make certain that no one on the board or even within the association has a conflict of interest with a vendor that's being considered to provide services or products to the LCA. We did put in a clause that provides a $5,000 emergency or urgent repairs clause. We did some conjectural spending. One of the things we did was we talked about what would happen if the bathrooms were badly vandalized. As some of you know, there's been some really nasty vandalism in Hawaii parks where someone's gone in with I guess a sledgehammer or something, and smashed up toilets. And we were able to determine from a couple of local plumbers that $2,500 wouldn't cover us in that kind of an emergency. So we did put in a $5,000 emergency repair, which of course would be used with great discretion and wisdom. And then we did give the authority for our two employees, Michael Jaunillo, our 16-year employee and maintenance manager, and Kim Folsetter, a 6-year employee in the office, to each have a $500 spending, discretionary spending. Kim regularly buys office supplies and printing cartridges and things like that. And Michael regularly buys parts for our tractor and mowers and gasoline for the machinery. So that would keep them able to make the purchases that they need without the board having to vote on it every single time. So I'd like to make a motion for the acceptance of the procurement policy as currently posted. And as I described, again, the entire policy, I'm sure the board has all read it. And I'll ask for a second, and then we can open discussion.
So is there a second? Alice, I think, is seconding. Alice, you're seconding it, right?
Alice is muted.
I know she's muted. I'm just looking at her face. Yeah, she said yes, I think.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So let's open up. And again, this whole issue of procurement was a very, somewhat contentious issue. And so again, I want to open up for community feedback. Again, please keep your comments to 1 minute. And Jim Penny has his hand raised. So Jim, you can go first.
Well, clearly some work has been done on this, and I appreciate that. I'm not clear, though, about utilizing some of the talent that exists within the neighborhood. The paragraph that mentions license and insurance by contractors, of the 32 items that were listed out that were done, probably more than half of those could have been done by local people. And I know, for example, within what we might call the Longhouse, one of our guys locally did all that work, and I don't know if he's licensed or not. So I'm not sure we need the clause about, other than on major items, about requiring certification, because this neighborhood is filled with a great number of people that have quite a bit of talent and can do many of these kind of activities. The more complex, I couldn't agree more, but the minor ones, we should always reach, I think, or at least think about reaching within the community when possible. And theoretically, that would save us a lot of money.
May I?
Yes.
Jim, that's great. I couldn't agree with you more. There are a couple of glitches. Hawaii state contracting law states that if we use volunteer labor that exceeds $1,000 in value, we've broken the law in terms of the contracting laws. I'm sure that that rule is bent regularly by many, many people. A much bigger concern in addressing it with our insurance provider has to do with workers' compensation insurance. Us bringing a person to work here as a volunteer does not preclude us from being liable for their workers' compensation if we're having them come on a clearly work relationship. So we would have to address that. Within those parameters, both staying legally within the contracting laws and also providing for the potential liability for the LCA for an on-site injury. As long as those two T's were crossed, I couldn't agree with you more.
And it might be possible to get a release, and that's probably a question for the attorney, from a volunteer doing work so that they would agree not to, in the event of injury, to come back and haunt the LCA in some fashion.
We could certainly explore that. We could the insurance agent seemed to imply pretty clearly that you cannot exclude yourself from workers' compensation insurance, except as family members. If you know your son or daughter is working for you, you can create an exclusion. But it's certainly worth finding out.
Okay, and I'm looking at.
I know it was never addressed in the past, but we're trying to be a little more scrupulous in terms of protecting the LCA from potential liability. As Robert said, the LCA has already spent almost $50,000 on lawsuits that were brought against us by members who completely blindsided us with those lawsuits. And so the other thing is, if somebody were to be horribly injured, to be killed, or some other catastrophic injury while they were working for us, it would be tough to say, too bad you signed a waiver. And I think I couldn't agree more. It's worthy of discussion.
So let's move the conversation forward. Is there anyone else who has some comment on this policy before the board takes a vote? Does any board member have a comment to make about the policy?
Can you hear me, Robert? This is
Yes,
Phil.
I hear. Phil, go ahead.
I'm in favor of a procurement policy, but I think the limits ought to be decreased. I think the limits ought to be 1,000 and 2,000 in an emergency. The employees, $500 each is reasonable, but I think that fiscal prudence, we should take a more careful approach to control spending, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you. Are there any other comments before we move the question? Call the question. Okay, so without any further comments, I'm going to call the question. Alice, do you want to call the roll?
Yes, all in favor of the passage of the motion of accepting the procurement policy as proposed, say yes. Andy Andrews, and if you are opposed, say no, sorry.
Yes, Alice, thank you.
Andy, yes. Robert Golden,
Yes.
Philip Denny,
No?
Alice Lindahl, yes. Motion passes 3-1. 3 yes to 1 no.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Andy, you're on again with the LCA
Okay,
truck
so
update.
I have some bad news. The LCA truck that it purchased just less than 2 years ago has had a catastrophic transmission failure. We had the truck, Michael Jaunillo discovered the problem. We had the truck towed at Michael's suggestion to a firm in Hilo called Transmission Technology. We contracted them at the cost of $185 to do a complete analysis of the transmission, and they've sent us back a written quotation for the transmission repair to be in excess of $4,900. We're having the truck towed tomorrow from Transmission Technology to the Ford dealership, where we have decided to procure a second estimate independent of the Transmission Technology. That second estimate is going to cost us $145. Until we get back that second estimate, We won't know for certain that we can't do the repair for a significantly lower number than $4,900. But if the cost comes up at a comparable number, we are up against a dilemma. We purchased the truck less than 2 years ago for $6,000 cash. We purchased the truck used from an LCA member. Obviously, it was at the time we purchased it, it was already 12 years old and had approximately 59,000 miles. It was purchased right at the height of the lava flow. I don't know the history on it, but it was purchased while Fissure 8 was spewing. I don't know exactly what that's all about. But in any case, the Kelly Blue Book value on the truck is sadly equal to or less than the cost of the transmission repair. So the wisdom of moving forward to put $4,000 to $5,000 into a truck that's only worth $4,000 obviously isn't prudent. So Michael Jaunillo has very generously been using his own truck. We've asked him to use it at an absolute minimum, and we did ascertain very carefully from our insurance carrier that our liability remains in place even though he's driving his truck. We have $1 million vehicle liability policy. That policy does remain in place, so it covers the LCA. We have made arrangements for a rental truck with Enterprise. The rental truck would cost us $295 a week. We've been able to avoid that cost by Michael offering to use his own truck. What he's doing is he's doing as much as he possibly can that doesn't involve a truck. He's doing the tractor work and the other work. And but we are going to have to, the Ford assessment on the truck will take place on Monday. We did have to have the truck towed to Hilo initially, which cost us $116. We're having it towed from Transmission Tech to the Ford tomorrow, which is costing us $68. And then we'll have to decide, based on what Ford tells us, how to move forward. So I guess this is more kind of a shot across the bow warning that we may have a vehicle purchase in our future if Ford concurs with the assessment made by Transmission Technology.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Now, Jean Graham had her hand raised. I just saw it. I don't know, Jean, do you want to speak? I don't know what, I just saw your hand come up. Jean Graham. Jean, going once, going twice.
Can we? Jean appears to be unmuted.
Yeah, I don't know why she's not talking, but I just saw her hand raised, so I don't know what's happening.
Okay.
All right, so we'll wait. Andy, can you, before we move on to your last item, can you give us an update about the work on the budget?
Oh, yeah, sure. I was waiting to hear about a meeting. I had thought Phil was going to call a meeting of the team of Alice and myself, and we didn't hear. I did understand from his email that he's very tied up with some other things, so that's certainly understandable. I've been doing preliminary procurement of some quotations from 3 reserve study companies. The typical sequence of creating a budget is for an HOA across most of the United States is to do a reserve study The reserve study will establish a due structure, a necessary due structure. The board will then either concur or not on that due structure, which will then establish the income uh, for the upcoming year, and then the budget can be created out of that projected income. So the budget process is moving along fine. We're actually going to use real financial experts to do it in the reserve study. The one that was done initially with very wonderful intentions by Phil and by Cheryl Kaut, both were didn't really have any income basis. So we need to get that squared away, obviously, to come up with a meaningful budget. I am in speaking with. I did send out an email to 13 past board members asking them to supply this board. Oh, we had voted last time to reach out to previous board members asking them to send us previous budgets. We got back a couple of kind of nasty emails, but we didn't get any budgets. So the best we can tell, there hasn't been a budget. I again went through minutes. I actually searched the minutes with a search engine. The word budget never even shows up in any of the minutes for the past 11 years. And so it appears the LCA has been kind of going along without a budget, which probably worked just fine because the eruption hadn't happened yet. And so things were pretty much on a steady state. So I think Phil's adamancy for a budget is well-founded. I think it's very well-founded. I think that the importance of doing it correctly and as a real measured steps moving forward is very crucial because of the absence of a budget for many years past. In researching with some CPAs and some other accountancy people, apparently the normal step one of creating a budget is to previous year's budgets and to see where the projections were right and where the projections were wrong. Problem is we have no budget to compare it to, at least nothing that's been able to be provided to me by any previous board member. So we're feeling like we're going to take off on a clean slate. The other thing is that HOA budgets properly done are done on what's called a zero-based budget, which means that, as Phil has pointed out, again, very correctly, each year should properly fund itself. So, and there's no opportunity for a budget to not meet the necessary and prudent expenses of the HOA. So which is why the income side of the budget needs to be looked at very carefully as to whether the current due structure is too high, too low, or just right, based upon reserve studies. The big question on the reserve studies, which has never existed in the LCA, is whether we want the reserve to fund our roads. As previous board members know, especially going back to Al Detweiler's time and Heather Hedenschau's time, both of whom were presidents of the LCA, all of the road work was done with a special assessment. There was about $1.1 million was raised through a special assessment. But Al Detweiler tells me that that deal we got of that $1.1 million was an extraordinary deal that we were able to take advantage of a bit of a paving company really needing the work badly and willing to do it inexpensively. So the projection probably is that to repave the LCA roads at some point in the future, which certainly is a long way off. The roads look pretty good, but it will happen someday. We'll run into the multiples of millions of dollars when the time comes to do it. So a decision will have to be made whether or not we want to build a reserve that would do those road repairs. The reserve companies that I've talked with, all three of them say that it's our requirement to create that funding to do those roads. But obviously, ultimately, it falls on the board or a future board to make the decision as to whether or not we want to build the reserve that large. So anyway, that's where it stands, Robert. So we're
Thank you.
reserve. I'm going to bring the 3 reserve studies to the. I've sent them to all of you on the board. You've all received them, and I ask you to look at them carefully, and so we can have a discussion at the November meeting.
So you expect at the November meeting, we're going to decide on which of these 3 we're going to go with? Is that what your assumption is?
Or if we're going to go with a reserve.
Okay, great. Thank you. Andy, thank you very much.
You're
And
welcome.
Andy, one last piece you have here. You have the community center worker. You want to elaborate on that?
So for some years, Greg Armstrong has, for a set fee of $300 a month, has opened the gates and done all of the nuts and bolts of the community center. We've now been informed by our workers' comp insurance carrier that we can't go forward like that any further. There was an audit and or the threat of an audit, and we have to cover. We've been misdefining him as a contract worker. We don't meet any of the qualifications of a contract employee in Hawaii. He works on our premises. He works at our direction. It's a whole laundry list of why we can't call that job a contract job moving forward. So we're going to have to transform that over to being a direct employee of the LCA and cover Greg or whomever is doing that job with workers' comp, which is probably the right thing to do anyway. And so we'll be making that transition, and we need to submit to Greg or to submit to the LCA board a job description and get that all squared away. And there's a couple of other minor changes we're considering based upon the way that Hawaiian Shores does their work. So anyway, we're gonna, that will also, that transition will probably take place before the November meeting because we're being told we have to do it by our comp company. And then the job definition and the continuation and the restating of the job, we'll talk about it at the November meeting.
Okay. Andy, thank you very much. Appreciate your incredible due diligence on these issues. Thank you. Now, Phil Denny on infrastructure and maintenance report.
Thank you, Robert. Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Okay. First of all, I want to just make an announcement that I'm going to take a brief leave of absence for approximately the next month or so. I have to deal with the allegations by the board that I have been non-compliant with our driveway settlement agreement. This also, excuse me, this also has raised some conflict of interest issues, as I was told by Andy that because I was involved in litigation that remains active, that I cannot participate in the budget process because of this conflict of interest. So I need to resolve.
Robert, I'd like to call a point of order, please.
May I finish, please, Andy?
And you let him finish, and then I'll give you a chance to speak.
Okay. Okay, but a point of order actually interrupts the dialogue.
Okay. Well, what's the
point of order is that the point of order is that I never said such a thing. That's a complete misstatement. There was a policy that was passed, 3 separate motions that were passed that had that clause in it. The entire board passed those motions. It absolutely was not said by Andy. So I'd like to correct that for the record.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't, what I mean to say is that the board, which includes you, Andy, and I think that you would admit that you're the impetus of this, has made allegations of my non-compliance with our agreement.
Robert, I'd like to call a point of order, please.
Yes. And
To infer that I'm the impetus of it is negating the importance of the rest of the board. The rest of the board cast equal votes. They were no different than mine.
thank you, Andy.
At any rate, I'm going to take a brief leave of absence to deal with these issues. In the interim, at the behest of Alice Lindahl, she has suggested that the infrastructure maintenance subcommittee take on the prospect of dealing with the invasive monster trees in Leilani. I think this is a great idea, and one that I would be happy to deal with if I can resolve these conflict of interest issues. I would like to begin the process, at least while I'm on my brief leave of absence, to ask everyone on this Zoom meeting and all your neighbors to help me identify the worst offending trees. I would like to make this doable and realize that the number of trees that are a problem is very large, but I would like to identify the worst 100 trees and to start dealing with those and perhaps even choose the 10 worst trees and make those the priority. My suggestion would be to have members and any interested parties send us information about location, street address, TMK, and perhaps a photo. I would ask you, Robert, as the board president, to help facilitate where this information might be stored, as I don't have the ability to store that here. Perhaps Alice might do that as well. At any rate, I would like to invite the other interested parties here in Leilani to join in this initiative, and perhaps we could come up with some creative ways to make it fun. We could call it the Leilani Monster Mash, for example, or perhaps something else you creative people could come up with. And perhaps, you know, we could, you know, again, get people interested by making a contest out of it, or some other creative way to do this. As Alice has pointed out to me, when this has been looked at in the past, the arborists who've been asked to give a bid have given bids in the mid six-figure range, $300,000+. And while that seems like an enormous amount of money, I don't want that to stop the process, and I think that at least we should begin this initiative to deal with this issue. It's been put off way too long.
Okay.
So that's what I have to say.
Thank you.
May I ask a couple of questions? Phil, what are your thoughts of how to pay for it?
What, I'm sorry, say again, Andy?
What are your thoughts of how to fund it?
Well, again, I think the first step in this is to identify the scope of the problem, or at least the part we want to deal with. There are a number of potential people to assist, including the Big Island Invasive Species Committee. Apparently the county has some funds available. If these problem trees are on the property, private property, the property owners can be assessed through a process, etc. There are a number of ways to do this, and I would think that we should try and minimize the amount of LCA funds that we have to spend on this if we have other alternatives.
That's great. I think that's good thinking. Phil, can I ask one other thing? Would you be able to answer Jim Penny's question about the removal of the routes by Michael Jaunillo, since you're the infrastructure? Would you be able to bring them up to speed on Michael and the stump grinder? I don't know if you're aware. I don't know if you know the status
Yes,
of it.
yes, I would be happy to do that. I need to look into it and find out a little more information. But as I say, I'm going to take a leave of absence for the next couple of weeks, and so I would request to put that off until then.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. So now we're moving on. I appreciate everyone's patience.
Excuse me, Robert. Before you move on, I'd like you to address where people can send information about problem trees.
Okay, so that'd be, yeah, in fact, I wrote notes on that, and I'm going to put out an announcement to the community about
Okay.
that. And,
All right.
And so we'll collect that data, and I like the idea.
Robert, may I make a suggestion? I would be more than happy to create an email that would be entitled problemtrees@leilaniestates.org.
Okay, so you're going to create that email?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Would you be able to record the photos and information and TMK numbers and all that, Andy?
Well, it'll be emailed in, and I'll just forward it. I'll just
Okay.
forward that email to you, so you'll receive it all directly. But it will also be archived in the LCA emails as well.
Yeah, and
Okay,
we can ask for addresses and TMK numbers.
So would those reports go to admin@lca.org?
No, they'll go to problemtrees@leilaniestates.org.
Okay, okay, all right. Thank you.
Alice?
I'd just like to add a little bit of clarification. This problem is trees that are going to fall on the power lines and fall on the roads, and they are in the easement, which is the first 10 feet of these properties. And the trees that are further back are neighbor to neighbor problem trees. So since these are our responsibility, that's why we're focusing on them. And of course, nobody wants the power lines down. And but there have been neighbor to neighbor problems with trees in the past. And my suggestion to Phil is maybe find out, the details of the laws associated with dealing with your neighbors, but that we try not to do that at the same time.
Yes, I have done that, Alice. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Mm-hmm.
I have done that, Alice. The neighbor to neighbor stuff, I think, is a different issue. Obviously, it's the same trees, just in a different location. My only comment is I think that whether or not the LCA has an easement into the first 10 feet of someone's property, I think is open to question. The LCA has an easement for the roads and the landscaping adjacent there too. I believe it's 40 feet. But I think the trees that overhang the LCA property and are hazardous, even though they are on private property, the LCA would have a voice in determining what happens with them. In fact, I think we have an obligation to do that.
Right, I think so too. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks,
And,
Phil.
okay, thank you. So it's 8:30, and I'd like to finish this agenda. I was going to first to commend Alice. She's done an enormous amount of work on dealing with the issue of opening up Luana Street. She's really been an amazing trooper here. So Alice, would you like to give us a brief report, and I'll show those pictures when you want me to.
Okay, I'll give you the heads up when I'm ready for that. The committee to study the effects of the lava-covered roads, that's myself, Robert, and Patty, have really been looking at two different aspects of this issue. And one of them is working with Mr. Estes, who's been quite cooperative with us. We've asked him to provide us a detailed map and a description of what he intends to build that is create and clear on his property and where he perceives the road needs to stop. And he's agreed to do this to make us a good map. And he also has agreed to hire a survey to do a to find out the exact location of the south boundary of his property. And that has not been done to my knowledge, and he's going to have us out there on the day when they locate the actual pin. So we know exactly where it is we're looking at. And until we know where, it's going to be hard for us to work with the idea of the possibility of a road, because since the road is owned by the LCA, it's our responsibility to meet all of the county requirements regarding safety of the building. And there's a fairly involved process, not too bad, but we would need a permit from the county, and we can't do that without a good map of and a survey. And the second part of our effort has been to talk to the community. And you guys already know about this because you've been, I hope, filled out our online poll to give us your input on whether or not you think that the roads should be opened, and if they are opened, how we should deal with any problems that might arise from that. And Patty has been handing off to me the suggestions that people have made, and this has turned out to be the most exciting and positive part of this process, because people have great suggestions, lots of things that we may not have thought of, and a lot of people feel really strongly about the issues down there, and especially the people who live there. And I've told them that I would come around and interview all of them, and I've done about 8 so far, some on the phone, some talking to each other across the yard. But I've gotten a lot of insight that I didn't understand before this issue came up. And I even got a tour led by Chris Burmeister onto the lava on Ho'okupu, so I can understand what it would be like if we had people hiking out there. And I'm here to say it is tremendously treacherous. I fell down through air holes 4 times, and I counted Chris doing it about 8 times. That's because I made him walk in front of me. So it's actually a very dangerous place for people to be hiking about. And the other thing about having this poll has led us to a new understanding, and that is that our members want us to have a long-term strategic plan that's laid out and well explained and have it articulated, and they would like to see this fairly soon, because especially people who are rebuilding, they're making personal plans about their property and personal investments. You know, is this going to stay okay for a long time, or are things going to change? And so knowing how our governments will handle these problems that comes up with respect to the lava is something they'd really like to know as soon as possible. And so there will be lots of challenges to opening the road, and we've identified the most obvious ones, and that is people acting disrespectfully, a fairly long list there of the possible things that we would be looking at. But I made a little trip down to Kalapana, and I thought, I wonder what, you know, some of those housing areas are starting to look pretty good, but the stretches between on the empty roads, they don't look good. And Robert has volunteered to put some of my pictures up on his computer, and I'm going to say these are the things we absolutely do not want to happen. These are places in between homes and home sites where people have dumped trash. They've taken cars that don't work anymore. Some people have gotten junk, collected the junk and made homes from them. There's more than one school bus down there, and with lots of trash around. And the other thing is that places next to the lava have been frequented by squatters. And this is a picture of the squatter site on North Nohea Street on Glenn Cannon's property, where he had a squatter there for several months who was being really mean to all of the regular people there. And he managed finally to get rid of him. But this is what happens when squatters leave. They leave a lot of junk behind. Now, some of the features in there are things that the lava killed, but most of the trashy looking stuff is what the squatter left. And I've always been impressed with the places squatters are willing to go, and we've already had 2 episodes of people trying to camp out on the lava, even though the roads are not open. So these are issues we're going to have to deal with, and I believe that the people who live on the edge didn't talk so much about junk as they did about worry about the lava dust that would be kicked up by off-road vehicles, and also the noise that travels now much better across the lava than it ever did through the forest. So they'd be able to hear all the generators going that people are trying to live out there. So these are issues that we are focusing on. And the takeaway for me to you guys is that regardless of whether or not the Luana Road is opened, the members will help us write, and we will have a document, I hope, stating our long-term intentions for the protection of the investments in these people's homes and properties. And our goal down along behind the lava, as well as in the rest of Leilani, is to have a peaceful and safe neighborhood. And we want to make sure this happens for the folks down there. And I heard over and over from them, we want respect for the people who lost their homes, a respect that can only be realized by having the place stay peaceful and quiet, pretty much like it is now. So that's my report, and we will keep you updated every month, what else is happening.
Alice, thank you for a very, very informative report. We appreciate it. And the last item is new business. And in fact, I'm going to withdraw this one item. Heath Dalton called me, and he had an exciting proposal about Hawaii Kids Can. And I guess maybe Heath and I had miscommunication, but I thought it was that Hawaii Kids Can were organizing use of areas with Wi-Fi so kids would come and study. And I spoke to Sandy at Hawaii Kids Can. And in fact, they were just coming here and install Wi-Fi in our pavilion. And then students who wanted to make use of that could, but they were not organizing any particular study program or any organized study procedures. It was just they wanted to have more facilities for Wi-Fi available for students, something that I personally support. But I think, in fact, we could do that more cheaply than they were going to. They were going to have us give us that for the first year, almost say the first 9 months free, and then a year from now it would be a $500 a year cost for the Wi-Fi, and then there'd be a licensing fee of roughly, I think it's somewhere in the areas of $50 a month. But we currently have Spectrum at the community center, and I just think it just involves a conversation and of bringing Wi-Fi to the pavilion so people could come, be in the pavilion and use that, just like as you could park outside the library in Pahoa and use the Wi-Fi at Pahoa Library for Wi-Fi purposes. I mean, I've done that. So I will look into probably a more inexpensive way to bringing Wi-Fi out to the pavilion. I see no downside in that. Does anyone have any question about that? Okay, so look, just thank you very much for me. Oh, Alice, go ahead.
Would the kids sit in their cars, or they sit on the floor?
Again, so again, that was really not defined where they would sit, and
that sounds like
right. But at least we could have. I mean, we do have benches around, and looking further. But I think the key thing that Hawaii Kids Can was going to do is they were going to install the Wi-Fi infrastructure. That was going to be their contribution. They were not going to organize any study periods or anything like that for the kids, or get tables out, etc. Okay, so thank you. I just want to thank you for this meeting. I personally found it incredibly productive. It was nice that we had the community involvement. I will tell you, I did the recording. I will post that recording very shortly, Alice will do the minutes. Alice should be applauded for, she goes beyond what's necessary for minutes. They're really transcripts. Just to thank everybody for their participation, and we'll go forward in November. Alice, you want to say
Robert,
something?
how many people are there now? I always say how many people
Well,
came.
there were, I think we had a height of at least 21 people.
21, okay.
Right. So thank you, and I now call the meeting adjourned. Have a great night, and I'll see you shortly.